Hello and welcome to Maxim Foods Inside Track. Been a scorching couple of weeks here in Brisbane. Still enjoying that summer weather before it cools down into autumn. But I guess the dairy market couldn't be any of the opposite. It's quite a bearish sentiment out there on demand. We saw on the GDT last night another negative result across the commodities. Let's have a look at whole milk first. Whole milk powder was down 1.5%. It was probably better than expectations. The futures market did predict a fair slide on the basis of there being more volume put on the platform. So demand out of North Asia was still was quite good. It was probably the periphery markets such as Southeast Asia and the Middle East that were down on buying activity due to macroeconomic reasons. Their demand has been quite soft for the last few auctions, which has meant a flat to sort of easing off pricing in whole milk. In terms of supply, the supply is still reasonably good out of New Zealand, and Australian whole milk powder is still very scarce, so we'd probably expect a flat outlook for the next 3 to 6 months on whole milk. Having a look at skim milk powder, negative result on skim milk powder on the auction, but that was no surprise. We have seen some good stock out of the EU, the US, reasonably good on stock as well. New Zealand still globally people are paying a premium for New Zealand made skim milk powder, which is helping hold things up. However, that abundance of supply, weakening demand has meant that pricing has drifted off. Like whole milk, it's relatively flat, so 3-month outlook for skim. Having a look at buttermilk. Buttermilk across all the main dairy commodities is probably the best performing. Did see a dip last night on AMF and butter on the GDT. However, demand still seems quite solid, especially in Australia. Australian fat, is still quite scarce and in good demand, which is holding up pricing in Australia. New Zealand supply is good, but demand for New Zealand specific butter fat is still strong. So out of all the commodities, it seems to be the most bullish in nature, and we should still though predict a reasonably flat 3 to 6 months pricing wise, but it probably has the most potential to have an uplift in that time. Having a look at whey, sweet whey is still not a lot to report on that. Quite a flat market as China is still sort of finding its feet with the feed industry. In terms of proteins, we've obviously commented in the past on those on a fair downturn in demand on WPC and WPIs. That seems to be stabilising a bit across the globe. With supply and demand correcting itself and pricing being relatively stable. In terms of cheese, if we can have a look at cheese now, in the US, very volatile market, so what we predicted with higher production is for that pricing to continue to come off. However, we've seen some activity on the CME, etc., that would suggest otherwise. In the EU, supply looks pretty good, especially coming into the new season or into the peak season for the Europeans. So we would have to suggest that supply will remain abundant in the EU and pricing remain relatively stable or perhaps drift off. US is a bit of a question mark around the market direction there, but in New Zealand and Australia, despite quite a significant decrease in the the GDT, which given liquidity and volume traded, it's probably not the best representation on the market direction, but it is, food service industry in Australia is still going quite well. Cheese demand, butter demand is still quite high. So yeah, cheese it seems to be in more of a bullish position, especially in Australia. So we'd probably see cheese to remain a bit more evenly balanced and pricing to be a bit more firm in Australia. So in summary, on the supply side of things, obviously New Zealand, Australia coming to the end of their season into winter, so supply will diminish. In the EU, the opposite, they're coming into their season, so supply will increase. In terms of the demand side, still soft. We've seen a lot more activity from North Asia, from China. However, the Southeast Asian, Middle Eastern markets have been a bit quiet of late, so it has balanced things out and making things relatively flat. I hope you have a great fortnight. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.